I needed to go. Whoop. What up, everybody? My name is Andy. Welcome to Heathen Moto Life. We're gonna go on a ride today. We're gonna try Ogden Canyon again. Since the last time we came through, there was a accident that didn't allow you to come through either way. And what I'm gonna do today is I want to talk to you guys about one of my favorite riding experiences. I have a confession. I don't go on very many long rides. When I say long rides, I mean like road trips. I tend to do just kind of solo, short 1 hour trips and stuff like that. Hey, bud. Just around town, nothing really too far, and I just come back home and kind of go about my day. So the longest trip I've ever done, last year, I did a road trip to Michigan from Utah. My uncle had died. I originally wasn't going to go. I was, close with this uncle. Our birthdays were very close together, and so growing up, we would always end up having birthday parties at my grandparents' house, and they would always be with me, and then my uncle would be celebrating kind of our birthdays at the same time. I had a love for this uncle, but I was in Utah, and I didn't really know if I should take the ride or fly or whatever. Talked to my dad. He said, "Don't worry about it. It's okay. You're really far, so it's okay if you don't come." It kind of ate at me for a while. I did some inward thinking. I talked to my wife about it. Of course, she's like, "Yeah, if you need to go, go. But if you don't want to go, that's fine too." I'm gonna get real woo-woo here with you guys for a second. So my channel, Heathen Moto Life, isn't just because I ride bikes and bikers are heathens. No, this heathen is my religious belief. You feel free to look it up. What I did was I consulted the runes, a type of form of divination, and I pulled a single rune, and the rune was Rido, and Rido is the rune of the road. Just gonna paraphrase here: the rune of the road, the rune of traveling, the rune of adventure on the road, going from one place to another. I had kind of already decided that I wanted to go, so I took the rune as a confirmation of what I was already inwardly thinking, and I decided to go. Told my wife I was going. I told my family I was going. Hey, bud. And I was going to be riding the bike. The first thought from my family, at least in Michigan and Georgia, were, "You're riding your bike all the way to Michigan? Isn't that dangerous?" And that's fine. I needed to go. Whoop. Whoop. I'm just gonna wait. There we go. Well, that was scary. That's okay. Alright, sorry guys, I had to cut to the front a little bit. Almost got into an accident back there. Rounding a corner, there was a flagger in the road. There was some maintenance going on the side of the road. They braked, and so did I. My tire started to lock up. So emergency procedures. Practice your emergency procedures. Hard braking. When your brakes lock up, what do you do? Practice that stuff. It could save your life. Anyway, so I decided to go to Michigan on my bike for 1,500 miles one way, 3,000 miles round trip. Went to the auto parts store, the motorcycle store specifically, got some stuff to change the oil in the bike because it was coming close to 3,000 miles. And I figured I might as well get some fresh oil in, because guess what? I'm about to take a 3,000-mile road trip, and I'm going to need to change the oil. I want to change the oil when I get to Michigan. Change the oil, get everything ready, tighten some stuff up, grab what I need, pack what I need. And of course, this whole time I had been talking to my wife and letting her know my decision, and she was, absolutely okay with it. Of course, she was worried, she's my wife, about the trip. Left the next morning, started a group chat with all my family. They're like, keep us in the loop. Speaking with my uncle who's in Michigan. He was going to meet me somewhere in Michigan for lunch or something, and then escort me to my dad's house. The next morning I left, and I got on 84 through Weber Canyon, rode 84 to 80, and just got on 80 and headed east. Wyoming, pretty uneventful. Got into Nebraska. The first major town in Nebraska is a town called Sidney, Nebraska. I stopped there for the night, first hotel for the trip, did just over 500 miles, some like 560 miles that day. Woke up the next morning, went over the gas station, filled up, checked my tire pressures, looked over the bike, checked my fluids, got some breakfast, sat there next to the bike, drank coffee, got back on the road. About a mile off the exit, the back of my bike starts fishtailing, and I know immediately, I was like, oh, that's a flat tire. It didn't blow out, it just kind of went out. Emergency procedures: let off the throttle, pull in your clutch, and brake easily. Pulled over to the right side of the road, put my emergency flashers on, pull over, look at, and sure enough, my tire was flat. The rim looked okay, there didn't appear to be any other damage, and immediately was like, well, my wife would just simply say, I told you so. Look what happened. This is what I told you was going to happen. Or, this is my fear, what I was going to happen. Not necessarily I told you it was going to happen. Instead of calling my wife first, I called my insurance company to see about getting a tow. Turns out the insurance I have doesn't pay for towing, which is unfortunate. But they called for a tow anyway, which means it would just end up coming out of pocket. Secured the tow, then called my wife. Just kind of let her know everything was okay, reassured her about all the stuff. And I proceeded to wait on the side of the road for 3 hours. All the while looking up, seeing if there's any motorcycle garages in this small town, and I found one called Outlaw Motorsports. They didn't open till like 11, and here it was like 8 o'clock in the morning. Obviously they weren't open, so I was just sitting there waiting. Tow driver finally showed up, and by the time he had got there, it was just after 11. Took me over to Outlaw Motorsports and pulled up, and it was this really small shop, and my heart kind of sank. I looked at it and I was like, well, these guys aren't going to have what I need. I was hoping maybe if there was like a store or something with like tires and parts and stuff like that. No, this was just a garage. Offload the bike, went inside, talked to the nice lady behind the counter. She asked one of the mechanics to come over, looked at the bike. He said, yep, it's flat. I said, well, it doesn't look like the rim is too bad, but Nick, the owner, is going to be here shortly. If you want to wait for him, he'll be able to help you out. So I waited for Nick. Nick showed up, talked for a minute. Nick is a United States Marine veteran. Just kind of letting him know I was active duty Air Force, and he promised not to hold it against me, which is kind of nice. I looked at the bike and everything, let him know what I needed, and he's like, I tell you what, he says, I have a tire for another customer who's here in town. I can put it on your bike, so kind of get you back on the road. Oh my gosh, Nick, thank you so much. Like, this really saves my bacon here. It tells me it's going to be a couple hours. I told him I was kind of at your mercy. I didn't really have any other places to go or a means to get there. He kind of sat there for a second, and he said, I tell you what, you can borrow my truck, go get yourself some food, go check out the new Cabela's. It's brand new, go check it out, and we'll let you know when it's ready. Floored me, absolutely floored me. Came back with keys, and said, hey, here it is, and him and the girl behind the counter recommended a place to eat. Chose this little diner in town and went and ate there, and it was good food, and went and checked out Cabela's. Ended up going to Walmart, picking up some emergency roadside provisions that I realized I didn't have. Nick called a little bit later, said bike was ready, and went and picked it up. And I was back on the road, about 6 hours behind schedule. I was supposed to make the trip in 3 days to save myself. I wasn't going to do a 500-mile day after starting at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So I decided just to get as far as I could and just go from there, and I'd split it up into a 3.5-day trip. I would try and make up some miles the next day. Ended up in almost through Nebraska, ended up in Omaha, stayed the night there. This is not a great looking hotel. Locked my bike up, brought everything inside, and I think I went and got some dinner that night, but it was just something quick, and ate it in the hotel. Next morning, woke up, it was pouring rain. I looked at the weather, it didn't look like it was going to last very long, so the hotel had, a minor breakfast. Ate that, hoped that the rain would pass by the time I was done. Waited a little bit longer, and it looked like it was starting to let up. Checked the weather, and it was past. Didn't look like there was going to be anything else immediately in the area. Got on the road, got some gas, got back on the highway, started heading east again. At this point, I was in Iowa, and if you've ever ridden through Iowa, there is a whole lot of flat and a whole lot of not a lot, especially off the highway. Headed east, looking at the horizon. There was a pretty nasty looking storm. It looked like I was heading right into. Thought I was gonna have to get pull over and put my rain gear on and stuff like that. I had been driving and watched other bikers on the side of the road putting their rain gear on because they were doing the same thing, thinking the same thing. Hey, I'm about to get dumped on. Start getting closer to the rainstorm, closer and closer. Ended up, looked at the map, and it looked like it was starting to veer north. The road was starting to go north. Ended up going around the storm without having to put my rain gear on. I felt kind of lucky there. Kind of nice. Oh look, more construction. Welcome to Utah. Lots of construction. Missed the rainstorm, so I was grateful for that. Got a good amount of miles in that day. Ended up in Ottawa, Illinois. Better hotel than the last place. And across the street there was this looked like a sports bar, so went and unpacked all my stuff, locked the bike up, and brought everything in the hotel, and went and had a bite to eat, had a beer, and planned for the next leg of the trip, which should be the final day. I should reach my dad's place by just afternoon that day. Woke up the next morning, eaten my breakfast, looked up at the news just as I was about to take my first bite, and there was this storm cell north of Chicago headed south, and it was very long. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, well, I gotta go. I went and plowed through my breakfast, drank my scalding hot coffee, went upstairs and got all my stuff checked out and got on the road, just trying to beat that storm because I was supposed to get around Chicago that day. Going, getting closer to the city. End up having to pull over because it's starting to sprinkle. I'm like, well, I better pull over and get my rain gear on. Only had to ride in the rain for a couple minutes. I think I just ran into a band of rain, and by the time I had got through Chicago, looking behind me, the storm system was behind me, and I didn't have to worry about anything. Crossed into Indiana, stopped in a gas station in Gary, took all my rain gear off, and I called my uncle. I said, hey, just letting you know, I'm about to cross into Michigan. I'll text you the address to this place called Hopcat in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and we'll have lunch, and then we'll go from there. We'll, head to your dad's house from there. Good ride into Michigan, met my uncle. I had been riding at 80 miles an hour for 3 days, so I was a little jittery on edge from the trip, and just kind of talking to him, and had lunch, good food. Left there, rode through some nice, central Michigan back roads, and it was a good ride. Made it to my dad's house. Managed to see my family. My mom and sister, because I was coming to Michigan, decided to drive up from Georgia. They weren't going to come to the funeral either. Because I showed up, they decided to come up. We all ended up converging on my dad's house. And that was the first time all of us kids and my mom and dad had been in the same house together at the same time since I had came back from Japan with my wife. My wife was prior military, and she was military when I met her, and we got married in Japan and came back to Michigan. The last time we were all together was that long ago, so it was a long time ago. Spent a couple days there after the funeral, thinking about whether I should take a different route to experience something else. My uncle suggested taking the ferry from Michigan into Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and then just heading west from there. It would have been a slightly longer trip, but it would have been different, and I would have got to see Milwaukee. I might have got to have stopped at the Harley-Davidson Museum, or I might have done that, but I decided that I wanted to get home. I miss my wife, I miss my daughter, and I wanted to get home, so I decided to decline that offer. He escorted me out of the area. We rode together, started going west, and then he peeled off, and I started to head to Michigan. And it was an entirely uneventful ride to Michigan. I didn't end up staying in all of the same places just because it didn't line up that way. I think the only place I might have ended up staying the same was Sydney. I think the only other eventful thing was I looked up at my voltmeter, or my volt gauge here on the bike, and it was down to 0. And immediately I was like, well, part 2 of bad stuff. Looked at it, kind of knocked at it. You know, that's what you always do. Gauge goes down to 0, you hit it, and it went up. So I was like, okay, well, I don't think it's the battery. Maybe it's just the gauge or the wiring or the connection or something back. Decided to stop at a nearby gas station in a larger town that was more likely to have some sort of mechanic in it if I needed it. Turned the bike off, turned it on, fired right up, went inside, got a couple things, came back out, tried to start it again. It was started just fine. I determined that it was just the gauge and not the battery or the wiring or whatever, or the charging system in the bike. I say I determined, I said it was more like, hey, I'm going to gamble and I'm going to say it's this. And I'm just going to try and get home and hopefully nothing else goes wrong. Luckily, nothing else really went wrong, so it was fantastic. Because I had left a day early, I decided to kind of do the same thing. I kind of wanted to leisurely take my way back and not hurry, so it took me, 3.5 days to get there, to get back home. And that was it. Did a 3,000-mile round trip for the first time, and it was very memorable. It was a good trip despite the circumstances, despite it took my uncle dying for me to take this kind of road trip. But I felt fulfilled, and I think that's what I needed. Not that I wasn't fulfilled already, but getting a road trip like that under my belt was pretty fantastic, and I'm glad I did it. But I was really happy to take the trip. Glad I was home, though. Miss my wife and daughter. And that's really it. That's where we're going to cut it off today, or I'm going to go and let you guys go. Thanks for tuning in. If you liked the video, go ahead and hit that like button. If you want to hear more, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I'm going to try and upload every week on Mondays. I shoot my videos on Fridays or Saturdays, and then I kind of edit throughout the weekend and try and have it ready by Monday. So yeah, I'll just go ahead and let you guys go. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next ride. See ya.